Hello, welcome to the channel. If you're new, glad to have you join me for this Bible study. This is something new that I started here on the channel last Friday, and each Friday I will post the next part of the Bible study. So be sure to comment, like, and if you enjoy the videos, please subscribe. All right, let's get into Revelation. Verse 1 of chapter 2, we read, "To the angel of the church of Ephesus write these things, said he that holds the 7 stars in his right hand." Now the city of Ephesus was a very important commercial and religious center of Asia Minor. The temple of the goddess Diana was located there. And we know from our look at chapter 1 last week that Ephesus was the Apostle John's headquarters, as he was the pastor of the church after Paul's death and before his imprisonment on the island of Patmos. Now Ephesus was the church planter, if you will, of the other 6 churches. All of the 7 churches were connected by the same Roman road. Now verses 2 through 4 we read, "I know your deeds, your hard work, and your perseverance. I know that you cannot tolerate wicked people, that you have tested those who claim to be apostles but are not, and have found them false. You have persevered and have endured hardships for my name, and have not grown weary. Yet I hold this against you, you have forsaken the love you had at first." So we see that the church of Ephesus was officially praised by Christ because of their sound faith and perseverance through persecution faced by the church. However, they were disciplined for having left, not lost, having left their first love, which means they had lost their devotion to Christ. Now in verse 5, we read, "Remember therefore from where you are fallen, and repent, and do the first works, or else I will come to you quickly." So we see the solution to this problem is threefold. Number 1, they are to remember their former devotion to Christ. And number 2, they're to repent. And number 3, return, meaning return to the devotion to Christ as a church that they had before. Now Christ informs them if they do not do these 3 things, he will remove their candlestick. Now today, the church of Ephesus is in ruins. The church is gone. In this photo of the church, we see the ruins of the altar area of the church. And then in verse 6 we read, "But this you have, that you hate the deeds of the Nicolaitans, which I also hate." So who were the Nicolaitans? Well, they were most likely a libertine sect who used their Christian liberty in self-indulgence and in great immorality. Then we read in verse 7, "He that hath an ear, let him hear what the Spirit saith unto the churches. To him that overcometh will I give to eat of the tree of life, which is in the midst of the paradise of God." So in this verse we see that the praise to him, or the phrase rather, can't talk today. The phrase, "to him that overcometh." You see that there in that verse? Which most likely applies to all Christians who possess a genuine faith. Then in verse 8 we read, "To the angel of the church in Smyrna write, these are the words of the first and the last, who died and returned to life." So we come to the church of Smyrna. We are looking at the ruins of the church today. The city of Smyrna was a very beautiful city in Asia Minor. It was about 50 miles north of Ephesus on the Aegean seashore. For political reasons, Rome had allowed Smyrna to build a temple in honor of the Roman Emperor Tiberius. Now at this point, Smyrna began the evil of emperor worship, and this resulted in great persecution. In 155 to 156 AD, Polycarp, who was a disciple of the Apostle John, and he also was the bishop of the church of Smyrna, he became its 12th martyr. Now today, the ruins of Smyrna lie under the Turkish city of Izmir. Now Smyrna had been reduced to poverty by the great persecution of the Jews. They received no disapproval from Christ, but were encouraged to endure their persecution faithfully. Their encouragement? Well, it was that their persecution would be short, meaning it says there in verse 10, as a matter of fact, we're told that it would only last for 10 days. At the end of their persecution, if they endured faithfully, the crown of life was theirs. At the end of verse 11, we see the second death mentioned, which refers to eternal destruction in the lake of fire, reserved for all non-believers. Now, verse 12, we come to the church of Pergamos. And we read, "And to the angel of the church of Pergamos write, these things said he which has the sharp sword with two edges." Now, Pergamum was located about 50 miles north of Smyrna. And the name means thoroughly married. That may be a reference to the church as they had a marriage to the political system of Rome of that day. Now, the reference to the sharp sword means that Christ will judge the false teachers of Pergamos. Now, we read in verse 13, "I know your works and where you dwell, even where Satan's seat is, and you hold fast my name, and have not denied my faith." Now, Satan's seat may be a reference to the paganism centered in Pergamos. The city had a throne-like altar that was dedicated to Zeus, a temple for worshiping a serpent, and other temples dedicated to emperor worship. Christ commends the church for remaining faithful in the midst of such satanic influence. Now in verses 14 to 16, we read, "But I have a few things against you, because you have therefore some who hold the teaching of Balaam, who kept teaching Balak to put a stumbling block before the sons of Israel, to eat things sacrificed to idols, and to commit acts of immorality." Now the teaching of Balaam refers to the Christians there who compromised with paganism, which resulted in great immorality. This teaching at one time had led many of the Israelites into sin. The whole church is urged to repent of these sins and false teachers before Christ himself has to judge them. The church should discipline itself and not allow false teaching. Now in verse 17 we read, "He that has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit said to the churches. To him that overcomes will I give to eat of the hidden manna." Now manna in the Old Testament represents sustenance in life. Christ is sufficient for all believers' needs. And he's sufficient today for whatever you need. You can depend on him. It goes on in that verse to say, "And will give him a white stone, and in the stone a new name written, which no man knoweth, save he that receive it." Now the white stone with its new name symbolizes acceptance and approval by God. In verse 18 we read, "And to the angel of the church in Thyatira write, these things said the Son of God, who has his eyes like a flame of fire." Thyatira was located about 20 miles southeast of Pergamos. And it was the home of Lydia, Paul's first convert in Macedonia. The name Thyatira means continual sacrifice. The fire and brass in the description of Christ emphasizes Christ's promise to judge the false teachers of this church. Now the city was dominated by a female dye and cloth industry. And it is possible, because of this, that the church suffered from female false teachers. Now, beginning in verse 19, we read, I know your works and charity and service and faith and your patience and your works, and the last to be more than the first. Verse 20, notwithstanding, I have a few things against you, because you suffer that woman Jezebel, which calls herself a prophetess. And then in verse 21, 22 we read, and I gave her space to repent of her fornication, and she repented not. Behold, I will cast her into a bed, and them that commit adultery with her into great tribulation, except they repent of their deeds. Verse 23 we read, and I will kill her children with death, and all the churches shall know that I am he which searches the reins and hearts. So there was a self-called prophetess at Thyatira, and her name was Jezebel. Now, she was leading the church with false teaching, idolatry, and immorality. She refused to repent, and so would be judged along with her followers. Now we read going on in verse 24, but to you I say, and to the rest in Thyatira, as many as have not this doctrine meaning teaching, and much have not known the depths of Satan, verse 25, nevertheless, that which ye have, hold fast till I come. So there was a godly remnant of believers who had not accepted these false teachings, referred to here as the depths of Satan. And they are encouraged to hold fast to what is good and to reject what is evil. And in verse 26 we read, and he that overcomes and keeps my works to the end, to him will I give power over the nations. In verse 27 and 29 we read, he shall rule them with a rod of iron, they shall be dashed to pieces like the potter's vessels, as I also have received from my Father, and I will give him the morning star. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. So the obedient believers will be given a reward of power and authority in the millennial kingdom as he reigns with Christ. The morning star is most likely a reference to the eternal presence of Christ. Now we'll end here for this week. We will go on next Friday in chapter 3. I hope you'll join me as we continue our look at Revelation. And I thank you so much for taking your time to join me here on this channel and for these videos. Blessings to y'all. Take care of yourselves. I hope to see you next week.